Jeff, I've been the Minister for the Environment in Australia for about 2 years now. And when I first took over, one of the most apparent things was that nature in Australia was in serious decline and had been for some time. We normally publish a 5-yearly State of the Environment report, and that had been delayed by the previous government. But when it was released, it showed that we have continue to have some serious problems, and that those problems, including extinction risks and so on, would continue unless we did something serious to turn the trajectory around to become nature positive. So one of the early conferences I went to was the Kunming Montreal Biodiversity COP, and there Australia signed on to that ambitious set of global targets. And then, of course, coming home, we needed to work out how we implement those targets in a partnership with business as well as philanthropic groups, and of course, increased government effort and increased government investment. So we decided with the state and territory governments to focus on 6 key areas for us, to focus on 30 by 30. So we've added about 40 million extra hectares to our land and sea area under conservation in the last 2 years, and we'll continue to do that. We've got 12 new Indigenous protected areas being added to our national estate. So we've already protected an area greater than the size of Germany. We're going to keep ranges so that we can better care for country, with First Nations people leading that work. We've committed to no new extinctions, to managing invasives. We've got about $550 million that we've set aside for threatened species, and cracking down on feral animals and weeds, which is such a critical problem in Australia. We're incorporating climate change into our decision making. We're restoring priority areas, and we're working very hard to increase the rate of circularity. We've got quite bad statistics on circularity in our economy, so we've already committed to adding more than an extra million tonnes of recycling to our national capacity every year, about 1.3 million tonnes. So that's about doubling our recycling capacity. So that's what we're trying to do as a government. But governments alone obviously can't do it. And so I wanted to talk to you today about the incredible role that you've played with the Nature Conservancy as an organisation, and you personally leading that effort, and get some of your insights in preparation for the Global Nature Positive Summit that's coming up. I guess what I wanted to start with is what do you think we can achieve at the summit? Why is it important, and why have you decided to be involved?
Yeah, well, thanks, Minister. And first of all, thank you for your leadership and Australia's leadership. And there's a reason that we're in Australia as the Nature Conservancy, and Australians leading that program is because you're a leader, and we need leaders now more than ever. We're facing these incredible biodiversity and climate crises, and we have got to take bold steps. And it's countries are no different than we all were when we were teenagers. Peer pressure matters. And so the work that you're doing is not only important for First Nations, it's important for all Australians, but it's also important for the world. And so just as you did and showed up in Kunming, as we will be together in Cali, in Colombia for the next COP, you're going to demonstrate to people what nature positive looks like through Australia's example. And we're here to help you continue to advance that, to accelerate that work, and to make it durable over the long term, including financially durable. So we're really honored to be able to be a partner with the Australian government. And we see this Nature Positive Summit as really the prelude to that conversation that's going to happen in October in Cali. And so this leadership, this gathering of thought leaders, is actually going to be central to setting that up for some major commitments and pushing people for greater achievement. So that's one. The other thing is I do love that you are bringing together diverse coalitions of groups from the private sector, both nonprofits and for-profits, different governments, First Nations, all together to talk about how we move this forward. And so one thing that we'll probably talk a little bit more about is the only path to saving this planet is going to be through radical collaboration. And I really do appreciate how the government of Australia has been really thoughtful about bringing diverse stakeholders together to get after saving the one planet that we all depend on.
Thanks, Jeff. The Nature Conservancy has done such incredible work. You're talking about radical collaboration as a philosophy, but tell us a bit about the Nature Conservancy, where you've come from, what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. So, and I started my career at the Nature Conservancy, and I've come back to it in this executive role with great pride, but also humility. By whatever standards, many of the standards that one would use, we're one of the world's largest environmental organizations, started in the United States with a group of scientists who wanted to save a forest that they were studying that was under threat of housing development. But we've expanded. We now have programs across all 50 states and more than 70 countries around the world. And proudly, Australia is one of those. Our work is really ultimately focused. Our mission is, in short, to conserve the diversity of life on Earth for all life that depends on it. And so this issue so that's our mission. We have an approach, particularly around protection, that we like to, in short form, call READY, representative, making sure that things are effectively managed, durable, and inclusive and equitable. And that approach really underlies all of our work. We've set a bold suite of 2030 goals. And I just got off a call this morning where we were really being held accountable. My boss our CEO is saying, look, what's it going to take to get after these bold goals? And one of the answers to that, there are two answers. One is we actually have some pathways around the issues of nature protection, issues around providing food and water sustainably for humans and for the planet, and are obviously around climate change mitigation and adaptation. And those priorities are absolutely the path that we know we can get to achieve our 2030 goals. But the other way that we're going to get there is, as I mentioned before, radical collaboration. So while we are a big organization working globally to locally, we have staff who are in the field with Aboriginal groups, and then we have staff working with you and your teams at the policy level. We can't do this alone. So we have been employing a real culture, which surprises some people, of radical collaboration, wherein we partner with other organizations, raise money for our former competitors. We actually partner with indigenous groups, partner with governments, and it's that making that whole greater than the sum of the parts, which has really become a fundamental part of how we do what we do, and a defining factor of the Nature Conservancy.
And Jeff, it's actually really hard to pick out just a couple of your amazing projects to highlight, but I noticed recently a $200 million project to protect Mongolian grasslands, just as one example of the work you're doing globally. Can you tell us a little bit about that, how it came about and what it will achieve?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I mentioned READY, this representative, effective, durable, and inclusive approach. And one fundamental part of that is making sure that we design our efforts so that these protected areas of all kinds of protected areas, national parks to communal conservancies, that they can endure climate change, but they also have all the management, all the funding that they need to survive a warmer, more crowded world. And unfortunately, that's not how we manage a lot of conservation projects. We tend to be, have a grant here and a grant there, or look at 3-year time horizons rather than looking at permanence. And so that's what we did in Mongolia. And it's building off of a model called Project Finance for Permanence. Just as project finance is how people build major infrastructure projects like a skyscraper or a highway, and bring all the stakeholders together and all the funding committed in a single close, that's what we're doing for nature. So in Mongolia, a place that, yes, has vast steppes and mountain ranges, you would think, oh, there are not threats. In fact, Mongolia is getting hit harder by climate change in its continental setting than virtually any other country in the world right now. Desertification, the drying up of peatlands, the loss of incredible species. And it's affecting the people of Mongolia and the cultural traditions as well. And so they needed help, but they needed it done at a scale beyond a single protected area. What we did with the government of Mongolia, who had, like Australia, has been a true leader, is we negotiated a conservation plan that would maintain that biodiversity in perpetuity. We put a price tag on it per annum, which is actually turns out to be, in the case of Mongolia, about $14 to $15 million per annum. So cheaper than they might be in Australia. But we then figured out how we can sustainably finance. We brought money in off the sidelines and commitments of new sources of money that would go straight into the management of an area ultimately the size of California. And so that sustainable financing was central, but that can't happen all by itself immediately with the stroke of a pen. That takes time to develop. So things like increased park entrance fees or resource user fees if there are mining is happening and how funding is collected and flows back into the conservation of nature. Those are the types of sustainable financing mechanisms. But again, they take time. So we raised $71 million that would serve as a sinking fund to help Mongolia over the next 15 years to get to that point where it has realized all the funding that's necessary to maintain that nature in perpetuity, their entire protected area system. And so that's what we achieved. And so over 15 years, $200 million will be flowing into the protected area system, the creation of new protected areas to meet the 30 by 30 goal, which Australia is deeply committed to, and then funding it over time and in perpetuity, and also making sure that communities are benefiting. And so making sure that there is economic development opportunities tied to nature, which is in essence what nature positive is also really about. So that's what we did in Mongolia. I'm proud to say that that is part of a partnership that is unprecedented. So I've worked for a number of organizations, and most of the time we spend we spend our time competing and elbowing and fighting over funding. But now in this partnership called Enduring Earth, the World Wildlife Fund, the Pew Charitable Trust, the Nature Conservancy, and Zoma Lab, the family office of Ben and Luciana Walton of the Walmart family, have come together to help each other do more of these types of deals in Mongolia, to do them all around the world, to do them at a pace that matters, to raise money for and with each other, and to actually help each other technically. So we share this portfolio of places. And we ultimately want Australia to realize that same benefit. So we'll be thinking with your government, with First Nations, about how we might be able to deploy such a model and get conservation to be permanent.
I really love the way that you think about people and nature together. It seems to be really critical to the success of a number of these larger projects that you've done. You've also been working in Australia in the Murray-Darling Basin. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really honored to be a partner with the First Nations and with the New South Wales government. What we've done in the Murray-Darling Basin, first of all, we believe that is, and we know from our science in Australia that is one of the least represented set of habitat types on the continent, and thankfully that is a huge part of your government, your ministry is thinking about how do we represent not just we represent in our protection efforts the last of the least and the best of the rest, and so we make sure that those underrepresented habitats are conserved and protected in a way that's good for people. And so, and a good example in the Murray-Darling Basin is we joined a partnership with the Biodiversity Conservation Trust from New South Wales, as well as the Ngari Ngari Tribal Council, and helped to secure an 88,000 hectare area called Guyini, which was of critical importance to First Nations, as well as to the ecological flows of water and those important wetlands. And so we were able to not only be a partner to make sure that management was able to go into the hands of the Ngari Ngari Tribal Council, but also ultimately to raise the money so that the tenure was actually allocated to those First Nations. And so TNC is pretty good at raising money around the world and including in the United States. And we were really pleased to be able to not just be a technical and cultural partner, but also to be able to be a funding partner to make sure that these lands got back into the traditional management of their original custodians. And so that's a great example, but it's that kind of radical collaboration that was government and tribes and NGOs coming together. And we really need to do more of that across Australia. And so we're really excited. I think that the Nature Positive Summit is actually going to be a great place to bring people together, create the chemistry for more of that kind of collaboration that is representative, but also inclusive and equitable with traditional peoples.
Jeff, we've had a few good years of rain on the east coast of Australia, and I got to visit these beautiful wetlands that you're talking about probably a year and a half ago, and to see these masses of birds breeding, taking the opportunity of a few good years to breed up their populations was just incredible. To see them, covering these shallow inland lakes that would normally be dry grass or even in past years bare dirt. It is just lifts your spirits to see it.
Indeed. And nature will come back too, right? So when there are these challenges, when we get the right management in place, not just using Western science, but traditional knowledge, nature will respond. Nature will rewild. And so I think seeing those waters flowing again, not just from the rains, but how the land is managed, is really should give us all hope.
And in fact, I think a lot of Australians don't realise that the Murray-Darling Basin Plan is one of the largest investments in nature of any government in Australian history, because the whole purpose of it, we're putting about 180,000 extra Olympic-sized swimming pools of water down the river system, but the considerations about how and when the water is released to give maximum benefit to nature, to make sure that the floodplains actually get flooded occasionally, that those beautiful, 100-year-old river red gums get their roots wet every now and again, making sure that the wetlands are inundated when they need to be, doing follow-up watering. So when we've had a little bit of good rain and the birds and the fish breeding again, to make sure that there's follow-up water for them to complete their breeding cycles. That is a massive environmental undertaking, and I think it really is quite unique in lots of ways, because we've got different levels of government cooperating, the communities along the river system all the way from Queensland to South Australia cooperating, and we've still got a lot of work to do there, but the counterfactual, if we'd never tried to return some of this water to nature, the counterfactual is a nightmare, but also visible in many parts of the world where river systems are being depleted until they die.
Yeah, I'm grateful to your leadership in that basin, and it reflects the global peril of freshwater. Like we are terrestrial beings, so we spend a lot of time thinking about land, but freshwater requires a different approach. And you just named the fact that the timing and the extent of flows and flooding are as important as creating a protected area around a wetland. And so that is something that I think the rest of the world really could learn from what you're doing in the Murray-Darling Basin. And I'd really love to help uplift and help people see that on the stage in places like Cali, Colombia, but also help people learn. That's one of the things that's a global organization that we can do, is to bring people from the Orinoquia Basin in Colombia, for example, to see what you have been doing, to bring the government of Colombia to see what you've been doing, because it is really monumental. And I know that there is much more to do, and we stand by your side and that of traditional people in Australia to make sure that you're successful. So thanks for your leadership on that.
Oh, look, can I ask you about a couple of other examples of amazing partnerships you've done? Disney. You partnered with Disney after the release of The Lion King. Can you tell us about that one?
I was working for a phenomenal small organization called the Wildlife Conservation Network, who was really focused on wildlife. And one of the things that we did is we created a fund called the Lion Recovery Fund. And the cool thing about that, building off the experience from the Elephant Crisis Fund, as we know, elephants losing their ivory and being slaughtered was a huge crisis. Lions, we lost half of the populations of lions the past 25 years. And most people don't even know about that, much less understand what it does to landscapes across Africa and the people in many of those landscapes. And so we created a fund that democratized philanthropy. So in essence, a big organization or a tiny organization, a two-person organization, could equally apply with their best ideas on level footing to get access to this fund to help recover lions and double their numbers. So the purpose, but we needed more funding to support those innovative ideas, and we needed more awareness that we had lost half of the population of this incredible iconic species, and so that's where we partnered with Disney. We learned that they were putting the live action film of The Lion King. We're going to release that, and using our connections, our relationships, we were able to present an idea that, through everything from, kids buying a lion plushie toy at a Disney park to some of the revenues from the film, we're able to go and support this lion recovery fund and also tell the story. I'm a scientist by training, and there was a moment in my career where someone told me, Jeff, the only way you're going to save the planet is with a damn good story. And when I was told that, I thought that was crazy. But now I realize just how important it is to tell a story. And that's really what Disney was able to do for the masses in a way that a single NGO or even one single celebrity could not do. And so that was really important, to tell the story and raise the money to get that money to the best ideas across Africa. And that Lion Recovery Fund continues today. The Nature Conservancy serves a really important role in that recovery as we look at the protection and connection of these large landscapes across Africa, and places like Kenya, places like the Kavango Zambezi area, and the many countries in Southern Africa, where we're working across boundaries to make sure the Oco Delta still receives the water that you've referenced from the Murray-Darling Basin, similar to the Murray-Darling Basin. So it was a phenomenal partnership, and we need more of those.
All right. Well, Jeff Parrish, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you about your work and the work of the Nature Conservancy. I'm so looking forward to you and many other organisations having the opportunity to showcase some of these best practice examples in Sydney at our Nature Positive Summit on the 8th to the 10th of October. Thank you for joining me today. Look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Very much look forward to seeing you, Minister. And thanks again for everything you do.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for everything you do and have done over a magnificent career. Thanks.
Well, really appreciate it. And good luck with everything, all the preparations, and we'll see you very, very soon.